Okay, guys, we got a surprise panel coming out for you. Surprise for us too, kind of. But be prepared. Be prepared with questions, because we're going to have people running up into the stand with microphones. So if you've got any questions that you want to ask of this next panel, put your hand up, stand up, make yourself known. Yanis, I knew it. He's always here trolling me with first questions. And he's 18 and he's always in the front row. This is why we're bullish as Bitcoiners, because he comes to all of the events with his family and he's always got first hand up. So we already know where the first microphone goes. So make sure you keep standing up, because you're going to be able to ask some incredible guests some questions. We did actually just update the agenda. So if you want to ruin the surprise, you can go and see who's coming on. If not, just give me another 2 seconds whilst these guys get set up. I think we're good. They're all collaborating backstage. All right, we're good to go? Yeah. All right, well, let's bring them out one by one. So first of all, I'm going to call up the person I can see back here. So this is going to be James Lavish coming out first of all. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome James to the stage. Yeah, just take that one. Who else do we have back there? Who can I see back there lurking? Ah, there's a face I know. Lynn, are you coming back on the stage here? Lynn Alden, ladies and gentlemen. Great to see you, Lynn. Now I can see Jeff Booth back there, I'm pretty sure of it. Yeah, here he comes. Come on, Jeff, let's go. And last and by no means very least, our own Preston Pysh. And I'm taking that chair. Right, okay, cool. And I am the host as well. Surprise for all of us, like I said. So, Yanis, where are you, man? Are you standing up? You got your hand up? First question? Well, we'll get a microphone to him. Who's Anna? As soon as you can get out there, we'll get the microphone. But guys, let's keep it really simple until the questions start coming. Jeff, how have you enjoyed the conference?
Wow, this is a high signal conference, and I mean, that's every single person here. It's just been incredible. What a ride.
I think it's nice to have a bull market conference once in a while. I mean, it seems like the last several conferences I've been to have all been in the middle of a bear market. And it's funny, the energy's still pretty high at them because people kind of generally have a high conviction. They know what's coming next. But it's actually nice to experience bull market energy and Madeira energy. So I think it's awesome.
Day three, the energy's still high. I guarantee you there was no energy here at 9 a.m. There was nothing. James, how are you enjoying it?
It's an intimate conference. Everybody has so much energy, there's so much positivity, and the focus is on the right thing. It's on Bitcoin, and I cannot tell you how much we appreciate that.
I'm just curious what the traffic is for the websites for Madeira real estate.
Yeah, my wife has already informed me that we're moving here, so I've got to figure that out.
Yanis, you ready? Yeah, I know, I see you. Okay, Yanis.
Does this work? Yeah. I know this is like a random question, probably get that all the time, but what does Bitcoin truly mean to you? Because we all know that it means freedom, but what does it mean to you as each individual?
The connection of all of us.
Love it. It redefines that fiat kind of slogan, you know, your network is your net worth, right? This is our network, yeah, Bitcoin.
So I'm going to talk about this afternoon, but what is wealth? And I think people have a totally wrong perspective of what wealth is, and wealth is the connection of humans. And you can see it when you travel the world. You see what what things look like when you see what real people look like. It doesn't look anything like the news portrays it to be. When you meet people all over the world, when you meet all of you all over here, that's what it's supposed to look like. And that's what it is going to look like. You guys just are, we're all just living in the future, and more people are coming.
I want to make sure I got the question right. I didn't fully hear it. Is it what does Bitcoin mean to you? Is that the question? I think the network too. I mean, for example, Bitcoin's the only asset or network that I fly to conferences for. You know, there's no other particular asset that I would go and discuss with that much fervor. I think the only stock that ever kind of gains anywhere near that level of interest is something like Tesla. But even that, it's not like you see Tesla conferences popping up around the world on a regular basis. So there is no second best, basically, in terms of enthusiasm for an asset that people will come out to. And so for me, the coolest thing when I'm at these conferences is meeting people from so many different places. So for example, I would meet someone from Colombia, Saudi Arabia, Bulgaria, all like in back to back to back. And it's what, you know, we all have different backgrounds. We all are so different in many ways, but we all came to this island because we have interest in certain principles that are aligned. Basically, good money, portable money, you know, basement-resistant money, censorship resistance, and the freedom that kind of comes with that. And so that's why I'm here.
I would say that for me, Bitcoin it's the ultimate escape from an oppressive system. So it's the ultimate equalizer for everyone. So Bitcoin truly is for everyone.
For me, Bitcoin is freedom money, and it's anti-war money. My past put me in a combat zone for 2 years of my life. I was away from my family. I saw horrific things, and it was not pleasant. And because of that experience, at my core, that's kind of what drives me to be so persistent in trying to push Bitcoin forward from an education standpoint, because it removes war with a long enough timeline. I believe that it's going to remove the incentive for war, and it makes everybody free.
Was there another question here, Anna? Yes, there's one right in front of you there. No, other way, other front of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the conference, for the education. 3 days with Bitcoin. Okay. The question I have was not discussed at all at the conference. So when I read the white paper from the Satoshi and understand how much happened during the 15 years afterwards, and everything worked, and the number of innovations in the understanding of their game theory, the linkage to their real world with the electricity, their beautiful architecture and the math, all of that, I just cannot believe that this is like one genius made. So it is something like from aliens, you know, like metaphorically. So what is your perspective on how it happened? Like what led maybe a bit of historical perspective or your understanding how and why exactly in 2008, 2009, Bitcoin happened? Thank you.
Yeah, so my view on this, if I just look at Occam's razor and human progress, how it's always been, we solve problems. And the journey to get to Satoshi solving this problem was not, it just didn't happen all at once. It happened from all of the contributions that other people made in cryptography, and then ideas that didn't quite work. And then Satoshi had an insight that connected it all together. And why? Because that's what we do as humans. We solve problems. And that's what those problems then propagate. We solve them, and then we go on to the next problem. And so why? because it was the right time to solve the problem. The problem needed to be solved. Because the existing system was getting worse and worse and worse. And I actually wish I saw that problem when all of the people, I would say my heroes now, are those people that were trying to solve that problem way before I knew it was going to be a problem. So that's what we build on top of. We build on top of all prior knowledge based on that. So it's just obvious that we would solve that problem.
So there's a very long and detailed prehistory to Bitcoin for people to look into it. One of the most recent books on the topic is the Genesis book. It goes into a lot of those earlier projects that didn't quite make it, but they laid the foundation. So for example, in the 1980s, David Chaum worked on basically trying to figure out how to make fairly decentralized ledgers. That was a big step. Obviously, Adam Back with Hashcash in the 1990s, Hal Finney with reusable proof-of-work tokens. A lot of these things were little steps along the way, and Satoshi came in and basically put some of those ideas together and then added basically the control loop, the difficulty adjustment to kind of make that work. And in addition, there's certain technology that had to come before it. So bandwidth, internet bandwidth had to be good enough to support something like Bitcoin. The types of encryption that are used in Bitcoin only came out, something like a decade before the protocol did. So in some ways, Bitcoin came about as early as it could have, at least within a few years. And we're lucky that the person who launched it did it in such like a noble way. They didn't pre-mine it, they didn't, kind of reveal themselves and end up kind of being a scammy person. They kind of, that anonymous approach of kind of putting it out there, working on it, and then kind of stepping back, I think was a powerful thing that helped made the first one get to where it is now. And then in the 15 years that have, happened since the period came out, there's been a lot of change. I mean, even between some of the recent emails that came out, for example, and some of the related trials that are happening, some of the changes that were made between the white paper and the launch a few months later, those were actually pretty big. Satoshi took a lot of feedback from people before launching the kind of initial prototype. And then in the 15 years that have followed, it's mainly been market forces that help dictate where this goes. I mean, people had different visions on block size, different visions on soft forks, different things like that. And overall, the market just kind of, whenever there was like a reasonable question to be asked, the market would help settle that over time. And so the combination of being leaderless and letting market forces kind of take over and everybody putting in their small contribution where they can has gotten the asset to where it is now. And I think it's a testament to how decentralized it is, that it's got this rolling set of participants where people come in, they do their tour of duty on Bitcoin, and then they kind of step back, they kind of retire, and then it's another wave that takes over, and Bitcoin's on multiple waves of new people at this point.
Excellent. I think in the interest of getting through as many questions as possible, rather than all four of us answer the same one, thank you, sir, for the question. And yeah, it's nice to get a little philosophical. I can't even speak. So yeah, and nicely, I mean, I'm sure Craig is watching. I'm very proud of your answers. So who else has a question? Yes, sir.
Yeah, so we started to talk about game theory. I would like to have your perspective. Does Bitcoin is a Nash equilibrium among all the different currency for the different countries?
I didn't quite catch that. Did you catch the question?
Nash equilibrium in the game theory for Bitcoin among all the different countries.
Just the game theory of the currency. The thing that I think that all of these countries have, they're all aligned from a currency standpoint because they've all been pulled into this dollar system. So when we went through Bretton Woods, everybody's, I think in the audience is probably familiar with this talking point. The dollar gets pegged to gold, then all the other currencies peg themselves to the dollar. So they're all in that same system. The thing that I think so many miss with how they're all in the same system together is that system is trying to prevent deflation, technological deflation from occurring. Okay, Jeff's book speaks to this, but I think it's something that's actually rarely talked about. I know from a financial macro standpoint, people like James and I will have a discussion. We'll talk about bond markets and all this other stuff. But what's actually upstream of all these theatrics and maneuvering that central banks are doing is this idea that technological deflation is like a monster that keeps growing bigger and bigger and bigger and more powerful and more powerful. And the only way they can mask it or hide it is through the printing and the debasement of fiat currencies, because none of these currencies are pegged to anything. And as they do that, they're masking, they're not allowing the prices from going down from actually manifesting themselves for everyday people to see. And the more that they try to prevent that, the more walls and barriers they try to put in front of it, the stronger and the larger that deflationary monster gets. It has to express itself. It has to work its way out. So whether you're talking about the lira, or you're talking about the yen, or you're talking about, you name it, fiat currency, the reason why Bitcoin stands in complete opposition or on the opposite pole of all of those activities is because they cannot step in there and manipulate any of the code or convince people that are running nodes to run different software because of the incentive structure. And so that's what's different. It doesn't matter which one you're talking about because they're all in that old system that has perpetuated itself for the last 80 years together, and they're all trying to stop technological deflation.
Jeff, you got something to add here as well, yeah?
Yeah, that's right. But and I just want to build on something that Preston said before. The reason why we have always gone to war, always, is because when this gets to the end, the only way to actually fix it is to convince people. First, you have to divide your country against each other. And then because it's still on broken money and you can't let that happen, you have to convince your country to go to war with somebody else. You have to create a bigger enemy. And the real Nash equilibrium that you're talking about is we've set up a structure in the world where we only won't kill each other, because if we press that button, there could be severe consequences. So now we're trying to kill each other through drones and in different ways, and satellite weapons, and everybody's trying to do this without pressing and it's escalating. That's the Nash equilibrium that we're living in now. And the Nash equilibrium, because of Bitcoin, moves to cooperation. And there's nothing that can stop that from happening. We're moving to a cooperation world. And that move is so powerful that what Preston said, it removes war over time because there's no incentive for war over time.
Where's Anna up there? Okay, here we go. Yes, sir.
Hello. To have a follow-up question for you, how can we switch from the planned obsolescence economy to an economy where we only buy stuff that goes along a long way? And what would that mean for work? What would that mean for people earning money? Is there a realistic scenario where you say we can reverse the business model using Bitcoin?
Come at 2 o'clock.
Yeah, okay.
Come to my talk at 2 o'clock.
See you there.
I got to drop something on James's lap here. He's not had any mic time.
So I think what you're talking about is, and this is really difficult to wrap your head around. And when when I first heard Jeff talking about this is what made it click for me, right? Is where this deflationary pressure from technology. Just think about it. Every single person here has the ability to produce something personally. But when you add a layer of technology on top of that, you can leverage that to the nth degree, right? So you can 200, 300, 100 times your own productivity. But the problem is, and what Jeff and Preston were just talking about, is that you have the fiat government, the fiat currencies fighting against that, right? Because of the debt. I've talked about the debt problem a couple of days ago, and they have to deflate. They have to inflate the prices, debase the currency. But that's not natural, right? Just think about it. If all of us were to benefit from the technological advances in this world, we would all have to work less and have more. It's the absolute essence of that. It's the outcome of technology, which should be abundance. We should have abundance around us, but we don't. Why? Because the currencies are debasing. Okay, so what would be natural is for all of us to benefit from the technology, for those technological advances to multiply each of our individual energy output. and for it to produce abundance in our lives. So we have to work less and have more. It's really difficult to wrap your head around, but inflation is not natural. Deflation is.
Thank you.
Anna, is there anybody else up there that you can see? They're coming to you, Anna. Like this is well, Anna, ladies and gentlemen, Anna is there. So just form a queue next to Anna. That's the best way to ask a question. She's just at the stairs here.
Hi, I'm Appold from Norway. A question to Lynn Alden. Bitcoin is hard money, and it's deflationary. It's not short-term, but long-term deflationary. Do you see any problems with this very, very deflationary force?
So I don't personally think so, and I think some of the best examples we have from history are, for example, the late 1800s in the U.S. was a rather deflationary period in terms of most types of measurements of inflation. You had kind of persistent major growth, major technological growth. You had a lot of technologies really coming online at the same time. You had the railroads, you had electrification, you had the discovery of oil and various applications to use it. Then you had, early automobiles and things like that. And so that was a very kind of rapid period of technological change and way more efficiency. And so even though the money supply was still a little bit inflationary at the time, it was still linked to gold and more gold was coming up, the sheer amount of tech deflation that was occurring was overriding that. And so you had, on average, negative inflation for a pretty long period of time. And that's when the United States became the world's largest economy in the world. Similarly, if you look at the early Renaissance, that was in a very hard money environment, and it emerged, as one of the most prosperous and creative times in human history, kind of throughout much of Europe. And so, past shows us it's not really a problem. And then conceptually, basically, the idea that over time we get better and better at making things, so things should get cheaper. The fact that we have to cheat to make it work, I think, is just an unintuitive concept, and I think the burden of proof would lie in those trying to make that argument. I think what it does do is shift the anchoring bias, and I talked about this on another panel, that if you have very rapid inflation, and I use Egypt as an example, so 20% annual money supply growth, every person who has a salary, everyone who makes prices, like a small business, they have to constantly be on this treadmill of trying to keep up their nominal wage growth or nominal price growth in order to keep up with that rate, or they're getting diluted. They're becoming a smaller share of the network. Whereas if you had a more deflationary world, it's the other way around. And so, for example, one thing we see in the US is that people who change jobs a lot increase their salary faster than people who stay at the same job, which is kind of a shame, because staying at the same job, if you like it and if you're good at it, is a very, you accumulate experience in that role rather than jumping around frequently. And in theory, you shouldn't have to jump around a lot, but the reason they do is because there's an anchoring bias. So if the boss paid you, a certain amount last year, and this year you're trying to get a raise, they're inclined to give you maybe a 2-3% raise, and money supply went up 7%. But good luck making the argument to the boss. They're like, why are you 7% better than you were last year? And of course, you're saying, no, I'm 2 or 3% better, but money supply growth was 7%, and I'm just trying to keep up. But if you have a more deflationary money, the anchoring bias favors people that are maybe less powerful in that stack, basically, and so I think that there's some changes that happen, but I think most of them are constructive. And part of what it does is it reduces the types of debt that make sense. It makes the world more equity-based, and it just kind of shifts the default, because a lot of people, the default matters. The default is kind of what has momentum not given other powerful forces. And so where the default lies matters for kind of who wins in a system.
Thank you. Yeah, I see there's a healthy queue forming. We still got 28 minutes, so yeah, keep them coming. Keep these questions firing.
Thank you very much for your work, all of you. It's been great. I have a question that strikes me, and I cannot get my head around it. Is that we are very lucky, we are very fortunate. We are here. We have found Bitcoin. I think most of us have Bitcoin, right? But Bitcoin is now owned by very small percentage of the world, right? So we say it's free money, it's for everybody, I really believe it is. But my question is, how do you see the redistribution of Bitcoin around the world to really make it a standard, right? So to allow 8 billion people to hold it, because it's now held in very few hands. We are lucky to be one of those hands. But how do you see that revolution? How do you see the redistribution of Bitcoin going around the world and making it free money for everyone?
So one of the big things that is implied in that question is carrying your baggage from the existing system, how it works. And in the new system that is repricing everything in the other system, it's imposing a different system. And now let's go forward from the new system and think how that works. And so let's say you accumulate a ton of Bitcoin and you want to create an army for your control. What are you doing? You're distributing your Bitcoin, right? Let's say you want to just spend above your means of productivity. What are you doing? You're distributing your Bitcoin. So over time, Bitcoin constantly distributes to the most productive people, help in service of all others. And it keeps doing that forever. It's the exact opposite of the system that you're carrying the baggage in that concentrates. And that's why it's so hard to see, because people are intuiting, they're carrying all of the history knowledge of what this looks like, and it's imposing a completely different system, and it doesn't care. It just keeps on going, and it has to distribute.
Just to bring that idea home, you're thinking about a system that has a finite number of coins, of satoshis in it, right? Even though each Bitcoin can be divided 100 million times and even more. The problem with the current system is that the people who are in control of the money, who are close to the spigot, in that Cantillon or Cantillon effect, depending on where you're from, that they can create more units to use, but in this system they cannot. So if you can just understand that the finite status that Bitcoin can never be expanded. It has a finite supply. That's what actually allows that redistribution. It necessitates that redistribution. Whereas on the other side, where we are now, there is no redistribution. There's just creation of more units, and they don't flow down to everybody.
I have one. Yeah. So when we look at this is a common thing that's brought up. You have these people coming out of the fiat world with massive amounts of buying power, and they get first bite at the apple at this new currency, Bitcoin, that's being stood up, and that's an unfair advantage for places around the world that might not have as much buying power. And this is very true in that when we think of how Bitcoin flows to net producers, value creators, people that are actually creating a business that's actually profitable, because there's a ton that aren't. That's the only way you can hold Bitcoin. If your business isn't profitable, you can't hold it, or at least for any long period of time. You'd hold it for a month and then have to sell it. When you look at the infrastructure of these G7 countries and you look at the magnitude of these enterprises, and that they're getting first bite at the apple. So much of their infrastructure and so much of that physical stuff that makes up these entities are going to have to be re-engineered, dematerialized, reorganized in a way that manages the energy flow way more efficiently than it is now. You could argue that we're already seeing the start of this with commercial real estate being marked down 70%. I think that that trend over the next 10 years may amplify itself. And so it's going to be difficult for a lot of these entities, people, individuals. Michael went through the whole layout there on the first day, which was brilliant. But although they might have a lot of Bitcoin up front, it's going to be really, really hard for them to continue to hold on to it because of this CapEx expense, because of how tethered they are to physical reality and all this stuff, that they were incentivized to build through all that period of time. When you look at the countries on the opposite side of that pole that might not be global entities or global enterprises that don't have this first bite at the apple, when they're rebuilding, they're starting from, you can build the foundation the way that you want. You can build that foundation in a very efficient kind of way and then construct and build on top of that. That's a huge advantage, despite it looking like a disadvantage today for these locations. And so what you're going to find is a lot of that Bitcoin is going to naturally flow to these places as they become more value accretive, because they're able to build from the ground up in a more efficient way, while in the G7 large developed locations, they have to figure out a way to re-engineer all this infrastructure so that they can remain relevant and efficient.
I love this conference. Thank you so much, and I love Bitcoin. However, I think about threats. What threats does Bitcoin have? I mean, you know, besides the political threats and the economical threats, I particularly think about cryptography, and when the security breaks, I think this is one of the things that I think could be a big threat, and I would like to hear your thoughts about that. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think you know, Bitcoin it's 15 years in, which is long in some ways, but it's still fairly early. And there have been a number of security challenges over the way. And this actually shows why Bitcoin's design philosophy is so important, because the goal is to keep it as simple as possible so that you reduce the attack surface as much as possible compared to other projects. But even then, there have still been challenges because it's still a fairly complicated system at the end of the day. And so, for example, in 2013, there was an unintended chain split. In 2018, there was an inflation bug that was patched before it was exploited. And so it was a problem that could have materialized but didn't. And there's no guarantee that there won't be similar incidents in the future. I think over time the code is hardening, it's getting more organized, but it's still somewhat of a work in progress. You know, but I think that the design is so robust, the combination of proof of work, the combination of having that UTXO set distributed on so many different nodes, that I think Bitcoin is capable of recovering from certain major security incidents, should it have one. Even though it's not great. You know, it could threaten confidence in the project, but I think it's robust enough to overcome most types of attacks. But that's also why it's really important for the core maintainers to keep finding ways to harden the code. I think it's really important for so many people to be reviewing the code, because that more eyes that are on it, the more likely that bugs are reduced before they happen. I think another big kind of long-term challenge is probably going to be around privacy. So I think that governments are coming around to, you know, Bitcoin is basically winning on the store of value front, you know, with the spot ETFs in the United States and many other countries, Hong Kong potentially. It's kind of understood that governments are going to let people hold it, at least in a walled garden. But I think the next set of challenges is on making sure self-custody is not threatened too much, making sure private transactions are not threatened too much. And I think certain jurisdictions will be clamping down on that. We've already seen that in the United States. We've already seen that in Europe. We've seen that in other jurisdictions. And I think that's still a fairly long battle ahead in order to basically have the right to privacy. And tools, making enough tools that are very hard to stop and that proliferate so much that it kind of forces them to, you know, allow privacy to exist, that it kind of becomes less of a choice and more just of a reality. But I think that's still one of the battlegrounds.
Can I just, I want to perhaps bring Jeff in on this too. Yeah, there are a lot of attack vectors, and arguably there is one going on right now. Maybe there's a siege on the blockchain with all of these ordinals and spam and whatever else is in there at the moment. And I think personally, and I think Jeff, you've spoken about this before, I think complacency is a threat. I think we are a threat if we sit back and we don't do anything and we don't challenge what's going on. Did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I totally agree with what Lynn said, but actually when I go to a higher level, the threat is us, right? We're the nodes. And we know how important decentralized security is. And more of us every day know. So there's tens of thousands of nodes like us that are protecting this. And we protect the network. And there's going to be hundreds of thousands of nodes because humans now know, more and more humans now know how important decentralization and security is for this stack. And so on the other side of the risk vector that people are talking about, the other side of government control, this and this, okay, great. What do you think we see every day? We see all of the things that are way before that are being built to prevent that. And because that's what humans do. They solve these problems and they move forever. And so anytime you see this threat, it won't look like that. It'll try. You can expect everything to come at this. You can expect trying to control through layer 2. You can expect every single thing because the system is designed on theft. And that theft is exploitative to you. And so what would that system say about you? And what would it keep you in fear to be able to do it? But we were not meant to live in cages. And we have control. So we are the nodes. You, me, Lynn, Preston. And I know this. I'm not for sale.
Hey guys, I'm super stoked about Bitcoin and I'm super glad to be here. There's a few things just building on what he also said about my own worries. I have two. So the first one is the emergence of quantum computing and what potential impact that can do for the Bitcoin potential decrypting, the Bitcoin algorithm and all of that. So that's the first one that I would love to be addressed. Another potential pitfall that I'm thinking about is imagine in 2140 when the Bitcoin is fully diluted and no more rewards. Is it still sustainable to keep Bitcoin up only using transaction fees?
I missed the second question there, but I'll answer the first one, and then maybe we'll have you restate the second one. On the quantum computing side, I'm by no shape of the imagination an expert on quantum computing. But having talked with people like Adam Back and some other folks in the space about quantum computing, it appears to be far off. Now, the question that we don't know is, with the acceleration of AI and its development, does that help assist humans to maybe accelerate the quantum computing piece? Again, we don't know, but I think we have to have a deep respect for that. You already have techniques. I forget which company it was that said that their messaging is now equipped for quantum computing, that the encryption will remain intact. You have multi-dimensional key generation that Bitcoin can port over the legacy keys. Like, these updates can be made. Devs are aware of those types of things. But again, it comes down to the timing of how much time is that environmental factor maturing, and then how much time is it going to take devs to respond to that, and then what's the reaction if, and this is all if that could happen, right? Which I think most would say is a huge if. I think if you had a panel of quantum compute experts, they would say that, yeah, it's pretty far off for the particular setup that Bitcoin is. But those are some of the factors that I think are important to think about. And going to Daniel's point on the previous question, the most important thing we can do is all node operators, participants in the network, is deep vigilance for attack vectors or technological threats to the underpinning of what Bitcoin is. So I think the message for that specific question is vigilance and discussion and education with the pros in the room that deeply understand those technical things.
I believe that the second part of the question was about 2140 Bitcoin just surviving on transaction fees alone.
Well, to build on what Preston was saying and Jeff was saying, and the attack vectors, what Michael Saylor said in his keynote speech is that the most important thing in my mind for us to protect the Bitcoin ecosystem and to build it and grow it is to help bring more people in and educate them about it. Truly educate them. Don't fight with them, but educate them. So, for instance, Jeff and Preston and Lynn have educated me on a lot of different things. Jeff is the one who made it click for me. You all know this, I've said it before, but think about where I came from the institutional investing world. This institutional investing world has been it's been painfully obstinate in accepting Bitcoin and understanding it. Why? Because I come from a system of fiat that benefited me and all of my colleagues so greatly. And so for Jeff to bring me over to the other side, now that I've seen the light, I can understand how powerful and how important Bitcoin is, and I'm no longer fighting it. I'm educating other people. And I have a lot of colleagues who are now on the side of Bitcoin, because not just because of me, but because of all of the people on stage and other people. So that is probably the most important thing, is just to be patient and to educate each other on it. Now, as far as the question about fees and whether Bitcoin can survive and still be strong enough if it's just fees and you're no longer taking down a reward for mining the Bitcoin. Well, the Bitcoin ecosystem is growing exponentially, and the users are growing exponentially. And the way that the system is set up and the algorithm works and the nodes work is that we can have layers of transactions on top of Bitcoin. And eventually we'll have so many transactions that are happening throughout the day on top of that layer that those rewards, they won't matter. The miners and the nodes, they won't need those rewards for the system to stay strong. And so if you just think about it mathematically, as we go into the future, how that will work, the miners will still be important, and the nodes will still be important to settle the transactions just for fees. And the fees won't be onerous on an individual basis on that point.
One way to quantify it is if you look at Fedwire, which is the base settlement system in the United States, and by extension it serves other parts of the world due to the global reserve currency status, they settle approximately $1 quadrillion of gross volume per year, which sounds like a comical number. It's 1,000 trillions. And the Bitcoin network, depending on how you measure, there's a couple different ways to measure it. You can do raw volumes. You can also do adjusted volumes, so it kind of takes out exchanges kind of moving addresses between themselves and stuff. But it's a handful of trillions. So you're talking a couple % of the size of Fedwire. And I think the long-term trajectory of Bitcoin is very big. It approximately does as many transactions per month or per year as Fedwire, as that kind of base layer. The average Bitcoin transaction size is currently smaller than Fedwire because it's a newer, younger, emerging system compared to the biggest established system. But I think when you extrapolate, what James said, you have an exponential demand increase over the long run and fixed block space. And so I think that you have to be very bearish on Bitcoin adoption to not expect eventually that money-related fees eventually become a pretty significant, kind of minor incentive to keep the network going. And then for the quantum angle, one way to think about it is, Preston made a lot of good points. I'm not a quantum expert either. I'm not a cryptography expert, but I do try to talk to them. And generally speaking, the challenge there is that quantum resilient signatures are bigger. Right, so if you want to make a blockchain quantum hard, you generally need kind of just overall more bandwidth and more storage is happening, which doesn't make sense in a pre-quantum world. But that's something that developers might have to turn to should that quantum, computing reality come to us. And that could be another challenging time for Bitcoin to go through. But because it's a resilient network and because it kind of gets stronger when it's attacked, I'm optimistic that it would overcome that. And we have paths forward for how that would look like, and it's just it's another challenge that the network has to go through, I think, on its way towards long-term maturation and reaching its total addressable market.
I need to add on, because I think that question about what the fees are going to look like is largely a question of a fiat mindset in 2140. So think about what Bitcoin would be worth in 2140 when we have all transitioned to abundance and all prices fall to the marginal cost of production. And it feels like the air you're breathing now, why is that free? Right? Why don't you pay for it? That is what's coming. And those prices fall forever. So even the mining reward to there, once we are there, which we can't even see, what does it look like next? Right? So when people ask that question about what does that look like then, it's just we're dragging this statement we're in there right now into that future. And it looks so different we can't even imagine it.
Preston, I see you got something. Yeah, Preston's itching to add to that. Yeah.
The fee one drives me crazy because I hear it all the time, and I think of it from my background is in engineering, and so I look at things from a very engineering-centric lens. If you jumped out of a plane and you were a skydiver, right? Everybody has a terminal velocity. But as you would jump out of that plane and you'd be looking at that person falling out of the sky, the rate at which they're falling towards the earth is accelerating, right? And so if you were looking at it and you were watching that person fall, you'd be like, if you had to make a snapshot decision on what speed they would hit the ground at based on the first 2 seconds of the fall, you would come up with like some insane velocity that they would hit the ground at. But what happens about halfway down is they hit what's called terminal velocity, and they're going, a couple hundred miles per hour. I don't know the number off the top of my head, even though I should. But why does that happen, right? Because when you first look at it, it doesn't look like there's anything that would slow this person down. You're looking at the rate that they're accelerating, and you're saying there's no way that they would hit a terminal constant velocity. But they do because of the air molecules that you can't see are there providing some type of resistance. Because that person is dealing with physical reality. Bitcoin is tethered to physical reality, okay? So as we get to like what Jeff's saying, which is 10, 20, 30 years from now, there's a balancing effect that naturally occurs. If you're mining Bitcoin with really expensive electricity, with really old hardware, congratulations, you're gonna have to turn that thing off. You're not gonna be able to do it. So there's gonna be some type of like terminal velocity that happens with fees that these rigs are gonna naturally migrate to the cheapest energy on the planet. You're gonna create an incentive structure. This is why Troy Cross, who was standing up there earlier, is saying this is like one of the most ESG-friendly things that are out there. And the reason all this can happen is because we're not changing the laws of physics. We're working within the constraints of physics. And I'm very excited to see where these fees eventually lie, especially as the network continues to compound and grow in value at like a 40-50% clip annualized. And it's going to be fun to see all the talking points, but that's the reality of it. We're going to hit some type of terminal velocity, and things will be okay.
Anna, we've got 4 minutes. So if you've got one more, and please make it a quick one if you can, so we can get the thoughts of each one of them.
Thank you. My name is Femi. What blind spots do you see in the way we're thinking and working around this technology? What blind spots do you see?
Blind spots. Yep.
Complacency. That, and I'm going to talk about this in the afternoon a little bit, that we give our energy to the system that's controlling us, and we yell at people within the system that are controlling us, and we think it's powerful, and and the algorithms, we get more views when that happens, and we slow down at car crashes. We slow down at car crashes, and it tells you we can be co-opted because we want that attention. And all that attention, all of it, on both sides of that attention, are actually making the existing stronger, the system stronger, and you weaker. And it's exploitative. And it's exploitative to the entire world, you too, and you don't see it because you think you matter within that system. That complacency around that, or that giving your power to that system, it to me is one of the greater risks. I'm aware of it completely in me too, and that's why. And I'm trying to make more people aware of it. that they just didn't move their time. It's beautiful over here. And here's another thing. People don't move from hope, or sorry, from fear to more fear. And so they need to see hope and where this is going. And you can see this, you can feel it around this conference. You can see hope. And more people are moving to hope. And as they do, more and more people will move because they'll see it. So that would be my view of that. But it is, we could easily get co-opted because we give a system of control more control.
So I think at any given time, there's small blind spots, but the nature of the system is that when those blind spots are tested, that's when a lot of new incentive comes in to fix those blind spots. And that's kind of the nature of a control system. That's how control systems work. And Bitcoin is kind of the ultimate control system. The network effect for the difficulty adjustment, like the difficulty adjustment for mining, for example, is a basic control loop, but it adds so much robustness against the system, against the growth of processing over time, against big drops off in processing power like we saw in the Bitcoin mining. You know, I think for a period of time, privacy was not getting enough attention in the space, how to make transactions fairly private. And I think that over time that's being addressed now. There's been, you know, for example, a number of incidents where, like say, for example, the Canadian trucker protest, when people were kind of trying to donate and running into some privacy issues, and people realized maybe privacy has to be emphasized more so that it's more default, more easier to do. Things like that. I think at any given time, you know, scaling is another thing. People were worried about low fees during the bear market. Now they're worried about high fees and how to scale Bitcoin. And there's a lot of new, you know, designs rushing in to try to fill that demand. And we'll see how they land over time. But I think it's a very, it's a system that gets stronger every time it's tested. And at any given time, there's a small number of blind spots, but then the system overcomes it. Partially because everybody here and everyone around the world is working on it.
I think for me, as I was alluding to before, is that a blind spot of many Bitcoin enthusiasts, and especially the maxis, is that they have anger against the old system. You know, the original, the legacy system. There's so much anger there. Now, I'm guilty of shining light on the problems of that legacy system. But I do that in order to get people to convince them to understand why we need a new system. And so for me, I think I would rather help people educate others and bring them over rather than constantly fighting each other on the internet about it, on Twitter about it, or X or whatever it is now. And so, but I'd rather people, you know, welcome newcomers into the space without attacking them and making fun of them because they don't know certain things or they're new to it. That's not fun for anybody. You know, we have some important, really big voices that have been on the edge and have just now come over, and they're getting attacked and they're getting ridiculed because they didn't come over earlier. You know, it takes everybody time. It takes you a long time to wrap your head around this new way of thinking. And so if we can all just be patient and be welcoming to the newcomers and be generous with your time in helping explain those nuances and understanding this new way, I think that covers that blind spot nicely.
Preston, make it quick, brother.
All right, the clock's showing about 5 minutes, so here we go. No, it's showing 0. Blind spots. I would just say, real simply, at the base layer, store of value, layer 1 Bitcoin, I think that there's way less blind spots there than as you go to layer 2, layer 3, and get further out into the payments area. I think that there are more blind spots there. I think that we have a very good idea of where we think that might be going, but just because it's being built, the infrastructure is being laid, there's things that how can you know the things that you don't know, right? But I think having an appreciation for that situation, that there are blind spots, and maybe some of those areas is the key takeaway. And to James's point, empathy. We have to have empathy as a community to progress and move this thing forward, for more people for the right people, the people that are suffering, to figure this out now as opposed to 5, 10 years from now, We want those types of people to figure it out right now. And the only way we're going to be able to do that is just by being empathetic to where they're at, meeting them where they're at. That's all I got.
Well done. Ladies and gentlemen, please thank the panel and thank you all for your questions. It was a fun one. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you.